And joining us now is Henry Liu. He is active in the Chinatown-International district, has actually spent a lot of time helping the seniors in the community in various aspects. So Henry, thanks for joining us. What are you hearing among the seniors that you've worked with, that you talk with, that you visit with in the community about the concerns of any anti-Asian violence directed toward their community?
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me on the show today. It's an honor and it's a pleasure. And you know, I previously worked as a community organizer in the neighborhood, but within the last month, starting February of 2021, I moved on to a government job position. So even though I made this transition, I'm still in touch with seniors from my previous role, and I'm in touch with them through WeChat, a mobile app that we use to communicate, voicemails, video calls, text messaging, emojis. And really, what I've observed about all this public safety talk among the seniors is all of the information that they get or hear is from WeChat. And if they see any videos or any articles, they share it. And so that's how I know, what they're feeling or what they're thinking.
Just so people understand, describe what WeChat is. It's sort of like a
Chinese version of Facebook Messenger, I would say is the best comparison from my experience.
So I take it that you speak Cantonese or Mandarin or both?
I speak, my Cantonese is choppy, but I speak Toisanese, is another Chinese dialect, and is actually the most commonly spoken one in the neighborhood.
So what are you hearing?
What I'm hearing is so grandma's directly saying, I'm not leaving my house and I'm just sitting at home. There's nothing really to do. We've been in this zone ever since COVID hit. They haven't really left the house much at all or hang out with friends. So even with all this public safety and anti-Asian violence going on, I mean, it's still the same. COVID was the initiator, all this violence towards Asian Americans and the Asian community. COVID's still here, so they're still staying at home. I think that's the biggest thing to keep in mind. But yes, they do feel a sense of danger. So that's another reason why they don't want to leave their apartment.
Do they blame Donald Trump for this level of concern about their safety, particularly when he would use the China virus or Wuhan virus, this type of thing?
To be honest, I've never really heard much blame on Donald Trump from seniors in my experience of working with them. It's more of like, what they hear, what's the word on the street? And if they hear something bad, like usually it's mostly like homeless people trashing the area, like the neighborhood, the trash cans, there's trash all over the floor, and they're walking around and screaming or yelling. I think those are the things that get their defense system up the most. I wouldn't say that they blame Donald Trump for all this hate crime. It's more of like what they observe on the street. They don't have the sort of connection like we do with social media and the internet. To them, it's WeChat. What they see on the article is what biases them, and especially what they hear on the ground.
So what do you think they would need to feel safe again in the neighborhood? What would they need to have happen?
Absolutely. I think they need people that they know and trust, who they can depend on. Because right now, like back when I worked at my previous role as a community organizer, my primary audience were the senior residents, and they knew me as not only a community guy in the neighborhood, but they saw me as a friend. So they added me from their cell phone on WeChat, and we would talk just like friends do normally. But for me, it was a job. For them, it was a relationship. So I really think that they need more of these relationships where, because as a community organizer, my duties were register to vote, make sure they vote, do a whole bunch of programs that were grant related. But on the long-term goal or long run, these didn't really make a difference in the life of the seniors, the day-to-day basis. So what they really need is companionship. They need more friends, day in and day out. Like during the nighttime, I'm not there anymore. So they don't have anyone to, lean on or just have a conversation with. So I think there needs to be more people on the ground, just serving them directly in a more of like a friendship kind of method.
So what I'm hearing is that even what is more concern, even above the potential for crime, is social isolation. Because of COVID, they're inside and they're just not able to socialize.
Yeah, absolutely. Like right in the past, when I was still working in the Chinatown-International district, I was in communication with them at least 3 times a week. And what I mean by that is I host exercise classes and cooking classes. And to them, those were days that they looked forward to in the week. So we did this on Monday and Fridays. But now that I'm no longer working there, they always tell me like, Henry, when are you gonna come back and like host this like once a month at least? And to be honest, I feel a little guilty because I'm like, oh man, I'm so busy, and because I'm going to school and working a full-time job. So whenever I have some hours to spare, I want to spend it with my family and with my dog. I just want to relax. So I do feel a little guilty because I need to live too. I need to live.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But it sounded like you built really a special relationship with them. I mean, yes, you might have looked at it as just being a job, but you were a bit of a human lifeline for them, particularly during this time when you're, because of COVID, we're stuck in a place. And if you're older, they can't get out and do what they might have been able to do before, either, play mahjong or go to an exercise with you. That's got to be tough.
Yeah, definitely. What I realized is for the way that things are set up for seniors right now is things don't happen unless someone sort of builds a program for them. We cannot just expect seniors to one day just go out to the park and play mahjong or go out to the park and do some group exercising. I think that's very wishful thinking. I think there needs to be something to initiate it, something to kind of grab their attention to make them want to do it. I think, because they're seniors, they don't feel that sense of ownership. They don't feel like they have power over any decision making, that there's some policy or law that, restrains them from doing the things that they want to. And then on top of that, we have this public safety stuff. So it goes back to the thing where, we need more people, like more, not volunteers. We need more, like salaried positions for people who actually like invest a lot of their time in the neighborhood, working with seniors on a weekly basis.
I know there are some groups that say we don't want police in the neighborhood. And there are other groups that say we do need police. Where do the seniors come down on that?
The community night watch. So this group comes out at night, and seniors, they're at home at night. So they never see this group. That's the thing. I think it would be good for them to, see them and participate, but because of the time difference, this sort of connection, this communication doesn't, it's not, the dots don't connect. And then in terms of police, it's sort of the same thing where they don't see the police as often as people who are there to support them. So then there's another disconnect where, like in both situations, there's not enough consistency in appearance where, like you have the night watch group and you have the police and then you have the seniors, but the seniors don't see either side of them enough where they feel like, oh, these are the people for me.
So basically what you're saying is that they need a community connection. They need something that's organized, that makes them feel that they have a connection, or to have a routine, something they can be involved in that might really help them with their loneliness, or being, sheltered, or even concerns about their safety. If they had that, that might help them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my like what I've always believed would help the seniors in the neighborhood on the long run is if there were young people, like young folks who actually work in the neighborhood and live in the neighborhood. They don't necessarily have to speak the language. I think as long as they have that motivation and the energy to work with seniors on a daily basis and just be there for them when the seniors need them, I think this sort of disconnect would start to fade away. And that, seniors would feel more welcome. Like they would start populating these parks and stuff uh, on more special occasions or even on a daily basis, because these younger people would there for them. Because right now, like when I was working in my community organizing roles, we always expect to host activities in the buildings that the seniors live in. But even then, even if we host these activities, nobody knows what the seniors are still doing, because it's behind walls, right? That's why we want these seniors to be more out in open public spaces. So that's back when I was doing community organizing work. I was always wanting to do activities in Henry Park. Like I would have 6, 7 mahjong tables set up there, where not only seniors can get together and play and utilize public space, but people can see them in action and see like, oh, there's seniors living here, not just like randomly walking, buying groceries, but they actually use the space to socialize and play just like we do. Like young people, we use parks to play football and like have picnics. Seniors, they do the same thing, but not as, intense physical sports. They just do things that they're used to and grown up with.
Henry Liu, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate your input. And hey, enjoy the job you're in now, but if you get back in the neighborhood, keep doing what you do.
All right. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Joining us now is Ami Nguyen. She is an attorney at the King County Public Defender's Office, also chair of the Asian Pacific Americans for Civic Empowerment, C4. And Ami, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, this is a complicated issue, really. I mean, I know that we see the images of elderly Asians being knocked down in the community, or others that are under attack, but yet trying to understand what's going on here seems complicated. Agree?
Yeah, definitely. And when we see those images, it's not just images to us. It's my parents, it's my grandparents, it's my friends' parents. And so when you see those images, it provokes a very personal emotion for me. And at the same time, being a public defender, it also provides me insight when people are talking about how do we approach this as a race crime, and what's the history of racism in America. It's a very complex issue.
Yeah, one of the things that's really just crazy for me to get wrap my mind around is, I'm old, okay? I'm 68. And so I've experienced a lot. And I listened to the arguments today about that surround the increase in Asian attacks. And I see all the sides. I see young people's sides, how it relates to social justice and systemic racism, that Blacks have been pushed down so much that their voice doesn't count in a lot of ways. But yet there is a strain of racism always in the Asian community, Black against Asians, Asian against Asians. And then there's also the whole kind of overlay of white supremacy and white nationalism that, Trump kind of brought to the front. And how do you, and then throw it on top of that, law enforcement, the defunding police, that whole thing. And it all is part of that. How do you begin to explain it?
Well, the whole incident just brought me back several years ago when I was an undergrad, and the first time I saw, racism placed so clearly in the criminal justice system, and that was learning about the death of Vincent Chin. Vincent Chin was killed the day before he was married by two white men who had gotten drunk, chased him down at a McDonald's, and beat him to death. And they ended up being convicted only of manslaughter. And my understanding is getting probation. So that incident really highlighted to me the failure of the criminal justice system in failing victims of color. But in that situation, it failed because the person wasn't even, the two men weren't even prosecuted with what should have been properly charged as murder rather than manslaughter. And then you add on top of that the racism that we see today, and it's very complicated because people are pushing for an additional hate crime charge, but the problem with that is that when people commit assault, especially against seniors, they're not getting away with anything. They're going to still be charged with assault or a felony assault. But this additional issue of whether additional time and consequences should be added as a hate crime, I think it's very complicated, and it has a history of the criminal justice system being so racist. And where's the accountability there? That's imprisoning communities of color. That's a form of hate crime. Where's the accountability there?
Yeah, well, but it's interesting because I understand, that part of it. But what do you tell the elder or the victim that has been victimized by someone? And let's say it's a Black person who is the perpetrator. How do you say, it's all about racism when they're suffering and they've been, violated? What do you say to them?
It's still a crime to commit assault, still a crime to murder somebody. But I think a lot of media is trying to focus on this Black on Asian crime when we know, during the Trump and COVID-19, there's plenty of white on Asian crimes. But unfortunately, the media has chosen to focus on this view where the alleged attacker is Black or African American. And it's complicated. I mean, you tell them, and older generations, let's say hypothetically my parents, tell them, oh, it's a racial issue. And to some extent, they could be convinced of that. But at the end of the day, crimes happen. It's a criminal issue. And unfortunately, there are victims to crimes.
Okay, I get where you're going with that. And now I understand that, because what you're basically saying is there is a crime. There's an underlying crime. But for some reason, the discussion has come on top of that to make it political, to make it racial. But the bottom line is it's still a crime. Correct. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the argument has become political and racial, but there is still a crime happening. So there is justice being done here for those people. Correct.
And a lot of times people want that added punishment or indication of this is a hate crime in order to be satisfied. I think there's some need for that. But we all forget that this person is still going to go through the unfortunate, very racist criminal justice system. And so that's where things get blurred. And I think communities in power, communities in privilege use that confusion and blur in order to, suggest more penalties that are going to be impacting communities of color when it was supposed to protect communities of color.
Now, Amy, I kind of want to take issue with one thing that you said, and that is that the media gets a hold of things. Now, true, they report on some of this, and particularly if they have the images, and that's going to be, in a newscast, and it's going to be highlighted, those types of things, because it is happening. But I guess I would argue that the skewing of this really comes more from conservative media that wants to use this to say, look, that, it's a black on Asian crime. To almost, I don't know if they're justifying it, but to me, they want to lessen this thing to some degree or throw some type of skewing on it. I don't know if it's to justify it, but it's to, plays to their audience. I think that that's one part of it too. But the other part of this is that I think it comes down to, we're at this time where I think a lot of young people, particularly in the Asian community, they want to be, they want those in the Black community to know that they kind of got their backs in this period of time. And then you're also dealing, as my parents were immigrants as well, from Mexico, but within our cultures, we have racism, toward other people, even within our own cultures. So that's where I think the complication on this really gets, very difficult. And then I would imagine that would be something you would experience with your own parents as immigrants.
Oh, definitely. I mean, my parents came from Vietnam, specifically Da Nang, and they don't, before the Vietnam War happened and military and American military, civilian military came in, they didn't know what Black people were. They didn't know what Latinx community was. It wasn't until they arrived to America and was exposed to that, or soldiers, yes, but to a larger extent in America, and learned racism from American media, that, they're developed this racism of Asian versus Black, Asian Latinx, and especially for the Southeast Asian communities, because we were all three communities, and I'm going to say communities in a broad way. I know that within each community, there's a lot of different individual identities, but in general, we were thrown into poverty and forced to fight each other for limited resources. And so, yes, I mean, in Asian culture, there is this racism of, light skin, dark skin, because of labor history. If you're light skin, you're part of the rich class. If you're dark skin, you're part of the poor class because you're farming, you're going outside working. But I think when they came to America, they learned how to become racist. They learned from media how to hate Black people, and they learn from media how to hate Latinx. And part of the younger generation, and I want to give that caveat, I'm not that young anymore, I'm in my mid. So I'm gonna, quote young communities. I think communities younger than my parents' generation, we want to make up for that because we didn't know any better. We were thrown into poverty, forced to fight for limited resources. And so, a lot of crimes that happen are crimes against people that we know. And when you have, white people that we see on TV, but don't necessarily interact all the time, they're still strangers to us. We don't have that anger and hatred to them. But when we are in a small community and forced to fight for limited resources, we are taught this hate, but that hate is caused because of white privilege that force us into poverty in the first place, without resources.
So Amy, how should we talk about these incidents and remove the sensational from it, but really talk about it in a way that people can say, oh, okay, I understand that.
But it's basically making sure that communities have conversations with each other, whether or not directly the alleged victim, the alleged perpetrator, or through community leaders. And we need to have these conversations and recognize that we were placed to fight each other all the time systemically. And we need to have communications with each other because we're all part of the same community. We're going to be going to the same restaurants, walking the same streets again. And it's just not productive to ignore these conversations that need to happen 2 weeks ago, a year ago, 4.5 years ago.
Yeah, it's having a dialogue really to sit down and talk about, okay, what's happening here, to understand what the deal is, what might have prompted an attack. Because I think we know in some cases it could be someone with mental illness. In some cases, it could also be someone that just specifically wants to get money from somebody. So, we don't always know that race is an issue other than someone is vulnerable and they figure that they can hurt them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think in any way what we're talking about here, from my point of view, is that we're trying to justify anything. But I
Right.
think that what Matt and I really wanted to try to get at here is to bring some understanding other than just to have it highlighted as, an anti-Asian attack, and then have somebody take that and make something else out of it and skew it.
And thank you for highlighting this issue and very complicated matter.
Yeah, it is complicated. Ami Nguyen, thank you very much.